This is the new MG ZS Long Range. Basically, it's an updated version of MG's popular small electric SUV. So that's 5 seats in a slightly forgettable body, but this time with upgrades to soothe you through your commute. I think the most obvious thing has to be the fact that it has a bigger battery, offering up to 273 miles of range. Now, the last one only managed 163 miles on a standard test, so this is a pretty big jump. And at £28,500 in the UK after the government's £2,500 plug-in car grant, it looks like proper value for money. But is the new ZS EV more cheap than cheerful? Let's find out. Right, now, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. The MG ZS is okay to look at, but not really much more than that. This new updated model gets a grille, which is exclusive to the electric version, a little bit more aerodynamic as well. There's also been some sort of nipping and tucking at the front and at the back, but it's not exactly gone all slinky now, has it? I quite like this Battersea blue colour. It's definitely going to brighten up an overcast day like today, but I'm trying to decide if they've named the colour after the dog's home or the power station. Thoughts? One thing I did notice is that the charge point is now offset to one side of the nose, which is brilliant, especially because when you open it, it is much more substantial than it has been on previous models. You also don't have to bend down to see exactly where you're plugging into anymore. And there's a new LED indicator so you can see how full the battery is getting. This is a really positive upgrade. I think MG obviously listened to feedback from Electrifying on that one. There are also these LED headlights on all versions and new wheel designs, but the basic proportions are exactly the same as before. Now, is it me, or does the body look a little bit too big for the wheels? Kind of like the whole car is sort of on tippy toes. I mean, it is absolutely fine, but I wouldn't say that it's the most sexy or the coolest car around, but it's fine. So the big news when it comes to the inside is that there have been upgrades to all the digital bits. So there's this, a 10.1 inch landscape touchscreen, which is in the middle. There's also some new, clearer graphics. There's the new digital instrument cluster in front of me. And then, of course, there's wireless charging for your mobile, additional USB ports for charging, and lots of storage, including 2 cup holders in here. But there's also an app now called MG iSmart, and that will allow you to do stuff like set charge times to make the most of cheap nighttime electricity, and also preheat the car on those cold, frosty days, which is something that the ZS wasn't able to do before. That's a big improvement, as it means you won't have to spend 10 minutes and 20 miles of your battery range getting the car warm and defrosted on a winter's morning. You can do it all from the luxury of your bed, so it's ready when you are and has used electricity from the charge point rather than the car's battery. You can also check your charge status, lock and unlock the car, and the ZS will now manage over-the-air upgrades too, so it should stay up to date as it gets older, which is a very handy addition. One thing to note though, admittedly I haven't spent loads of time in the car so far, but pairing my phone and just getting stuff to work has been a bit of a faff, bit of a bugbearer. I don't think it's as slick as the competition, but generally it feels good in here. There's some nice contrast stitching down here, but I think overall maybe there isn't that wow factor that you can have in other cars, but it's probably just a little bit higher in quality than a VW ID3. Now, the practicality back here is actually where the MG really scores in this price range, because there is space for no less than 5 full-size adults to actually be comfortable as well, which I don't think you could say about cars like the Vauxhall Mokka-e or Peugeot E2008. Now, the boot is a bit bigger than the average hatchback, although there are a few odd lumps at the sides here. Other than that, though, it is a really useful shape for dogs, pushchairs, and you can actually fold the rear seats down if you need to, although they don't fold completely flat. Now, I would say it's probably not as practical or as spacious feeling as a car like the Skoda Enyaq, which has actually been designed from the outset to be electric. But again, it's a very decently practical car. It's just not that surprising. And also it can tow a small trailer or have a bike rack mounted on a tow bar. So obviously the most attractive thing about the long-range MG ZS EV is the longness of its range, and 273 miles ain't bad at all. There's a 72 kilowatt-hour battery mounted under the floor, and it manages average efficiency for this kind of car, hitting about 3.5 miles per kilowatt-hour in ideal conditions. Stick it on a home wall box and it will take around 10.5 hours from flat to full. And it will take a feed from a DC rapid charger at about 80 kilowatts. That means you can pull into a motorway service station and you could see 10 to 80% in just over 40 minutes. A more common 50 kilowatt charger will see the same percentages in just over an hour. And that's putting in roughly 160 miles of range, which is actually what the old car can manage at 100% charge. Okay, so on to the driving. And yes, you have guessed it, the new fresh-faced MG ZS is acceptable. There are 3 strengths of brake regeneration via this little button down here marks curves. It works well enough, but I wouldn't say any of them are particularly that strong. You certainly won't be able to drive it with just one pedal like you can with some cars like a Nissan Leaf or a BMW i3. The steering, it's kind of a bit video gaming. There's not loads of information coming through, and actually it feels oddly heavy, particularly if you put it into sport mode. It does feel fast enough though for obviously keeping up with traffic and dealing with the day-to-day stuff, and it does go around a corner confidently, but there are a few rough edges that kind of remind you all the time that this is the more budget end of the engineering spectrum. For example, when you pull away from the junction, the steering kind of squirms a bit as you try to put down the power. It's sort of something that you used to get in hot hatches, back in the old days. Similarly, when you're mooching along in traffic, there's that initial bit of creeping forward. The car judders slightly, almost like the engineers haven't quite got the fine tuning sorted. It's also not desperately quiet. On a rough bit of tarmac, it does get quite noisy in here, and you can certainly feel those big bumps. Nothing outrageous, nothing terrible, but you do notice after driving something like VW or Vauxhall or another European brand that this isn't quite the same standard. But of course the ZS is cheaper, so you might forgive the odd rough edge here and there. Now there are 3 models in ZS's new range: the SE, Trophy and Trophy Connect. The SE is pretty competitively equipped. For full details, do go and have a look at electrifying.com. But in short, the Trophy gets that sunroof, plus a few more bits which are worth having. Oddly though, you get these seats, which look really nice and leathery, but are actually vinyl. Now that's good for the cows, but it does feel a bit squeaky. They are heated though, which is always a plus in my eyes, once you've actually managed to find the button in all the menus. But overall, I think I'd actually prefer to have cloth seats. What isn't worth having really is the Trophy Connect model. It's basically 500 quid more than the Trophy and only actually adds a couple of connected services that you have on your phone anyway. So there really is very little point, because you can have all of that stuff on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. But I'm probably getting a bit niggly here. What we are looking at is a very practical set of improvements to a very practical car. And the ZS EV long range is fine as long as you're prepared to accept that it's not as sophisticated or perhaps as interesting as some of the competition. Saying that, it is of course a few grand cheaper than similar models from other manufacturers, and you should get decent enough money back when you come to sell it. So a cheap lease deal might appeal to you. All in all, it's a good car. Maybe not a great one, not hugely inspiring purchase, but a solid effort from MG. As ever, if you want to know more about other cars in MG's electrified range or any of its competitors like the Kia e-Niro, Kia Soul, Hyundai Kona Electric or VW ID3, then please do log on to electrifying.com, where we'll do our best to answer any questions you might have. And do tell us what you really think in the comments.